Lately, I've been getting a lot of questions about sensory overload because of the showcase season and all the travel ball that goes on all year long, and quite frankly, all the pressure that the young players are under playing in front of the coaches, and they're trying to make a good impression, and maybe they're doing a good job as they're communicating, but when they get in front of the coaches at a showcase and they're doing their batting practice and they're hitting or whatever it is, they feel like they have to hit 10 out of 10 line drives, when in fact the real goal is to look efficient and professional and to look like someone that they can work with, that they're excited to work with. Coaches will often say, I could work with this kid. He would fit well into our program. Now, what that means is that you understand what a professional looking approach feels like and how to access it by understanding the rehearsals that you need to do. But that's just kind of an introduction of what I wanted to talk about. What I really wanted to talk about was intention. Once you have that look where you're doing your rehearsals on deck and you know what to do in between innings and you know how to prepare for the game when you're standing out on that white line when everybody's stretching out on the foul line before the game and watching the pitcher warm up, and you know how to eliminate pitches and figure out what the guy's going to be throwing, and you actually get the actual look of each of his pitches, and you're getting prepared for the game. There is a big difference between a professional and an amateur. I often tell my students that if I could get inside your head and we went out there together and we wouldn't have to spike the football, we wouldn't have to jump around waving our arms. Simply the things that we would be doing, not that we were trying to get attention, but we'd be busy doing the work to get our timing down, to get our filtering down, coping with the pitcher, sinking release, timing the pitch, rehearsing contact, rehearsing all the different things, coordinated stride and transfer, getting our swing flow down, doing all the things while we're studying the pitcher all at once, showing a square swing, doing all the different things that professionals do and that amateurs seem to struggle. Well, they do. They don't seem to. They do. When you look at an amateur, when I look at an amateur, and he's doing the best he can to to hold it together, they're struggling to swing and to maintain an axis that's really stable. Well, they're struggling because they don't have the correct intentions, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Primarily, is about your intentions and how that affects information overload. Okay, so if you don't know that your posture is supposed to end up in a certain way, if you don't know that it begins in a I'm going to kick your ass posture, it's not that your shoulders are pointing down. I mean, your shoulders rotate flat. They don't rotate. I mean, as you swing, your back shoulder comes underneath your front shoulder. But primarily, if you're just standing up straight, you're just thinking about it, your shoulders basically rotate flat to the ground, parallel to the ground. And, you don't want to have your front shoulder too steep, because if you land at foot strike and your front shoulder is too steep, your bat doesn't follow that path, because it's got to follow the path of the core. And if you're angled too steep, you're going to either come too steep into the zone, or you're going to have to actually swing on it on a different plane than your core motor. So that's not going to work either. What you have to do is you have to have a dynamic posture, starting from an I'm going to kick your ass posture, but you can still have a flat shoulders. Basically, imagine you're going to get ready to run a race. You don't necessarily have your front shoulder pointing down. You can have your shoulders flat, but you're in an aggressive posture, ready to kick some ass. And that position versus I'm going to get my ass kicked, where you're kind of leaning back and you got your hands over your face and you're squinting because you're worried about getting killed. Well, those two different postures are completely opposite. Okay, so when you're hitting, if you begin at a I'm going to kick your ass posture, that's the beginning of where your axis has to start, because then you're going to go into your transfer, you're going to land, so maybe you've gained some ground. As you go into rotation, you're leaning over the plate a little bit, and then you're going to end up pinching your posture over the plate. That's a dynamic posture. Okay, so it changes, but you maintain a single axis. The only way that you can do that is through intention. Well, how do you make intention work? Well, intention works by understanding rehearsals. Now, in baseball, it's so tragically hard, it's so difficult, that there hasn't been a lot of thought put into, logical reasons, why it's difficult, or, people don't talk a lot about the whys of hitting. They just know it's hard, and you just got to hit a lot, and you go down the batting cage, you just start banging on the ball, and you change your feel, you keep making adjustments until you figure it out. Well, that's basically everybody's route that they take, and it's tragic because you're basically changing your mechanics in search of an intention that is based on an experience from the past that you had a good game, when you had a good game. Well, it could have been last week, last month, last year. It could have been 3 or 4 years ago when you got 4 hits and you were hot for 4 games in a row and you had this kind of a feel. Well, it stopped working. Why did it stop working? Well, because things change. Your feel is so abstract that it changes, and feel is mechanical. Because it's mechanical, everything you do mechanically changes the time it takes you to get to the ball. Now, this is significant. If it changes the timing of how long it takes you to get to the ball, you're timing that, and you're also timing the pitch time. You're filtering out his motion. You're coping with the pitcher's release and delivery, and you're basically dealing with someone that's attacking you, trying to make it impossible for you to hit it. So you're dealing with those two fronts. When what good hitters do is they make their battles, they do their battles on one front. And you think, well, what do you mean? Well, it's what you do in soft toss. Intuitively, you do this in soft toss. Even though it's easier to hit soft toss, so you'd think, well, I could do it just like I do in the game. I can think about my mechanics every swing, and yet I can focus on my timing. But you don't do it. You don't pump the brakes either. You naturally flow into the ball on time. You have a nice stride and transfer. You don't hesitate at all because you have good timing. Why? Well, your conscious mind processes at 40 bits per second. Your unconscious, your subconscious, your automatic mind processes at 40 million bits per second. Okay, that means your processing speed of the automatic mind when you've trained an event or a move or a series of moves like a dance, something, some sort of a routine, in this case, a swing, and an approach where you're timing not only your swing flow timing, but you're timing the pitcher, and then you're timing release, and you're timing the actual pitch. Well, there's a way to do it with an intention that summarizes it so that it simplifies. Because if you take everything separate, it gets too complicated, and then you get information overload. Okay, so information overload, I'd have to say right now, information overload is when you're just flat out wrong, when you're thinking about things incorrectly. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, if someone gives you some hint about, okay, well, you got to push your hands back. Okay, well, why not already have them in position? Why not already have them in your launch position? And then just ride forward. Just like, look, if I'm going to steal second base and I'm standing there, okay, I'm a left-handed hitter, so it relates to me. Because, okay, if I'm going to go to second, I'm not going to rock back to first and then go to second. I'm just going to go. So you can't tell me that I have to rock back before I can go forward. It just doesn't work like that. And another way you can prove that is that you can walk sideways along the line. It's something that you should be doing, just like I said, that people would know that, that a professional player was inside a youngster's head as they were training, if they looked different, they'd be lining up along the fence and went, what got into this person? Obviously, you put Don Mattingly inside the head of some young kid along with the kid, so he's helping him, and man, that kid's going to look totally different than any other young player. All right, well, when things are incorrect, when you're thinking incorrect, when your intentions are incorrect, that's where you get information overload, because it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, you have doubt, and then you try to make an adjustment, so then you have another intention that you try to mesh with the first intention, and then those don't go together, and pretty soon you have 3 or 4 intentions, and so now you're going to go, okay, so what does an intention mean? Okay, let's start off with something simple. Intention is not thinking on a real high resolution, thinking about everything you're doing exactly. It's more of a low resolution thought. For example, if I was hammering a nail into a piece of wood and I had to hammer it at a certain specific angle to attach a piece of, 2 pieces of wood together perfectly, I would have that intention. And I wouldn't be thinking of my swing of the hammer mechanically. I would just have the intention. Now, would I want to bend the nail? Would I be cautious of bending the nail? Of course. How hard would I swing? Well, as hard as I could without bending the nail. So someone came along, this is where when it's wrong, it creates information overload. If someone came along and said, hey, just swing that hammer as hard as you possibly can. Well, if you actually had a hammer and you were actually doing that job, you would know that what that person was saying, unless they're just nuts, you would know that they meant as hard as you can under control so that you don't bend the nail. I mean, you have to filter that out. I mean, I've had major league players that I've asked, so, who was most influential in your life about your hitting? He said, oh, yeah, that's easy. It was my college coach. And I said, oh, yeah, what'd they teach you? And they go, oh, he had a 5-point plan. It really, changed my life, and it made me the hitter that I am today. So, man, I'd love to hear about it. And they start talking about it, and I go, you don't do that. You don't do any of that. So, in other words, in spite of that 5-point plan, I mean, maybe that was their starting point. Maybe that's what got them thinking. But in spite of that 5-point plan, they actually filtered it out and figured things out. Maybe it encouraged them to think outside the box, or maybe it encouraged them to take a line of thinking that they wouldn't have, ordinarily went into that direction. But the fact is that there's good intentions and bad intentions. A good intention would be hammering a nail into the wood. It's a very low resolution picture in your mind. What's low resolution? It's kind of like a thumbnail photo of your profile pic on some application, and you don't really care about it. It's so small that it could be low resolution. You wouldn't put a real high resolution picture in something that's just going to be the size of a quarter. Okay? Now, there are high resolution things, and people worry about these high resolution thoughts. Okay, those happen when you start doing drills, and coaches and other players and moms and dads try to help their sons, and all the way through the big leagues. Trust me, you got concerned parents and coaches trying to help players all the way through pro ball and college ball, of course, in high school, and they're giving them advice. Okay, some things, the player's able to filter out and kind of make sense of it. But usually what helps most is if the player has an ability to filter well, so that when they hear feedback from a loved one, that what they're actually getting is a picture of what they're doing. And if they're doing something wrong or incorrect or something sloppy or out of sequence, by the explanation of what your loved one is or your coach has explained, you pretty much pick out what they're trying to say, and then you can fix it. Okay, so, but the problem is, but you've done that yourself. and then you just kind of create this low resolution solution, and by just, it's a feel. And all players say, oh, I'm a feel hitter, I'm a feel hitter. Well, where do you get that feel from? You get that feel from the truth. You go, what do you mean? Okay, well, just like a hammer and a nail, you know what the job is. The problem is with a baseball, you can hit it to any field, so it's not like driving a nail. You can hit it at any altitude. You can hit it on the ground, you get a hit. You can hit it on line drive, you can hit it right at somebody. Hit a hard line to drive, hit it right at the outfielder or in the gap. Or maybe you hit it so hard at the right or left fielder that they end up taking a step forward, a step back, and it drops 5 feet in front of him. So there's so many different variables that it's hard to relate it to, hammer nail type scenario. But this idea of intention brings us back to the idea of understanding how to train correctly. Once you know how to train correctly, that's ultimately what big leaguers figure out. They figure out what they need to do so that when they get their pitch, they don't miss it. Bottom line, they figure out how to prepare themselves so that the first pitch that they get that's hittable, they don't even come close to missing it. They don't foul it off. I mean, if you're in the big leagues and you foul a ball off like someone would, like in the minor leagues or in college or in high school, if you fouled the ball off and had good bat speed and fouled it straight back and everybody went, ooh. In the big leagues, if you looked in the dugout after you fouled the ball back, no one would be looking at you and no one would be saying, ooh, because you missed the dang thing. So rehearsing is understanding how things work. And when you understand how things work, then you're able to rehearse it. Okay, for example, striding and transferring. Okay. Well, if I told you have to coordinate your stride and transfer, you can't stride, you can't reach your foot out and then transfer. It has to be coordinated into a flow, just like you do in soft toss. If you're not trying to simulate the game and you got things mixed up in your head and you're just trying to do it the same way that you do it in the game. If you have like an early stride and then you do a hip slide, well, then you might take soft toss that way simply because you're trying to simulate game situation. But that would be really bad and really counterproductive because you wouldn't need to do it in soft toss. Soft toss, since it's within 12 feet, it's easy enough that you could flow into the ball, transfer into the ball on time, which is probably the closest definition to timing that you could get, especially on a demonstration level. So what we're looking for are these high resolution rehearsals, very detailed, a very clear understanding. I am hammering this nail at this angle into this piece of wood because I need to attach it for this purpose and I know it's important, so on and so forth. Okay, so you understand what your mechanics are. Why? So you can rehearse little 3 moves at a time, and then they become a layer. When you make an out, you don't scrap it. It doesn't go to the scrap heap. If I said, listen, the stride and transfer is coordinated. Good hitters have a coordinated stride and transfer that flows. You wouldn't disagree with that. You would agree with that because you do it in soft toss too. Okay, so in a game, if you had a nice coordinated stride and transfer and swung with, a nice flow and you missed it, for some reason, you wouldn't blame it on the coordinated stride and transfer. You'd blame it on your timing, or you blame it on something else. Because at least that's correct. Okay, so if you have the correct, detailed, high resolution understanding of what brutally efficient mechanics actually is through every step of the way, from your stance, from the launch position, all the way through the finish, so you're blocking and you're not leaking and you're holding your posture, you're swinging around your axis perfectly. So, from start to finish, if you understand these things on a high resolution level, remember, information overload is when you're wrong, or when someone telling you whatever it is, it's wrong. You have information overload because it doesn't work. Because a layer after layer after layer, that layer they're giving you doesn't fit in with the layers. But when you're talking about something that's true, it will fit. Swinging across your face, you don't chase your face. Okay, you swing across that face, you don't pull your head and chase your face. Well, you know that that is a high resolution. You can work on that. You can sit there and put your head exaggeratedly sideways and swing back and forth and swing across your face until that becomes what your swing feels like. Absolutely feels like. It's a high resolution explanation, and you know exactly what to do, and then you can apply it to every drill, everything that you do. And there's many other things that you can do to expand on that one characteristic of a good swing, which is swinging across your face. But I'm not going to go into that because that's not what I want to talk about here. It's having the correct intentions when you go up there. So as young players, everybody's worried about getting information because on one hand, they're worried about other people telling them what to do because they've been burned so many times that if they try to do something, hey, we can handle it when we make our own outs. I mean, we can deal with it when we try something new, when we make an adjustment and it doesn't work. We can kind of deal with that. But when someone gives us some advice and then it doesn't work, it's hard to stomach. Okay, and okay, one time that's fine. But when it happens over and over and over and over and over, because coaches and teammates and parents are just saying, oh, put your hands here, put your hands there, for no reason at all. You have to have a high resolution reason. You have to understand what brutally efficient mechanics means. If you don't understand that, you're not qualified to talk about swing mechanics to somebody and give them advice without risking some sort of information overload. Another intention would be, for example, on a very recent post, on a recent video I made, I talked about momentum. Okay, well, some people get so caught up in these peripheral things like got to get your hands moving and push your hands back and do some sort of a loop going up and cock and go up, up and back and point. People get their bats so wrapped around their neck simply because they're trying to walk away from their hands or they're trying to do something, which none of those things are technically necessarily wrong, as long as while you're doing it, you're able to generate momentum with your hands. Because in a game, you're only, you may not move very far forward, but every inch you go forward, there needs to be a direct connection with your with your arms. There can't be any slack there with your grip and that bat, so that when you take those first couple of inches, you're bringing that bat with you. Well, that is an intention. Why? Because you need the momentum. Because if you want swing flow happens when there's momentum. Proof is walking tee. If you walk up to it and you know how to do it one-handed, you hold your front hand out and then you kind of scoop down and then you grab it with both hands and hit it with that rhythm, you know how the bat swings itself. So what I'm saying is, if you have enough of these intentional thoughts that layer together that you know that are truth, because you can point to the things that are true about them, then when you do make an out, you're not going to go back and go, oh, that's not it. Okay, so here's where we mess up. Our swing, our objective, our intention for our swing needs to be to become more brutally efficient every day. Now, maybe we're at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% efficiency overall. But in each category, maybe we're pulling our head a little bit, or maybe we're not holding our posture. Young players wobble a lot, and you can see them struggling to try to maintain posture because they don't have the intention clear enough in their head to know what angle they need that they need to maintain in order to create the maximum free rotational ability. I mean, there are certain angles where you can rotate really quickly and certain angles where you can't rotate quickly. And everybody's a little different, and so everybody's kind of has to find their own angle. But the point is, you need to know that. But when you can get these intentions correctly and you can intentionally approach the game by doing rehearsals and doing little drills or whatever you need to do to prepare yourself, and these intentions, like hammering a nail that you're trying to drive that nail in, are correct, and there's just absolutely no way that they're not correct, because they're general enough to get the job done, and then you have the leeway to kind of make it feel unique every day. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to feel that your swing's going to feel the same every day. I'm not saying that. Your swing's going to feel a little bit different because we change from day to day. But my point is, you still need to be trying to get efficient. The problem comes when we're making feel adjustments, not based on becoming more efficient, and when we're more efficient, we can become more repeatable, where we have a repeatable swing that we can count on, so that there's a specific time that it takes for our swing time to get to the ball, so we can rely on that, and then we can focus on just the pitch timing, and we can zero in on that. We can zero in on our plan, our intention about what we're going to get, so our mindset, and then we can zero in on, our automatic mind can zero in on our timing, so we're making adjustments on one front, on the pitch timing front, and not commingling the toolboxes of the mechanical toolbox and trying all these mechanical things to fix our swing just because we're looking for a different feel. But we do it. We all do it. We're all guilty of it. But upon further examination, I needed to examine this. I wish someone would have been able to teach me this as a young player, because case in point, for me, it was proof every time I'd get into a funk where I felt oversensory, and oversensory happens like you get a pitch to hit and you can't swing. Well, how does that happen? That would never happen in soft toss. Why? Because your intention is to look for that little arc. You know what you're getting. You know the tempo the tosser's going to throw it at. Everything just plays out and you hit it. You got a bat in your hand. You're there to hit it. So it plays out. You would never freeze unless they threw it over your head 10 feet or to the right or left 10 feet. Because that's not what you intended to do. You're not up there to do that. Okay? Well, I get pissed off when I get into a slump, and finally I just put my hands behind me, make sure I bring them with me, cocked and loaded still. I'd bring them with me. What does that do? That simplified the process so that I can focus all my attention on timing the pitcher and my mindset looking for the pitch exactly how it's going to appear. And then if it differs, it'll just freeze me, and I won't have to swing at it. You know, guys swinging at bad pitches is because if you're not looking for anything, you know, those guys say, hey, don't think. If you don't have an intention in your mind of what you're trying to do, even if you go down to hammering a nail, if you don't know what the intention is to drive this nail in at a certain angle, to fasten it in a certain angle so it looks a certain way, if you don't know that intention, you're not going to get the job done. Same with hitting. You have to understand the intention of what you're doing. If you're just Joe hitter and you put your bat behind you and then you just stand there and you have a blank mind, well, anything that you see is going to surprise you. You're either going to swing at anything or you're going to freeze at everything, because either way you're surprised at everything because you didn't expect anything. Okay? So we have to have these intentions. And so there's not very many of them. Now, over time, over the last 20-something years, I noticed there were 12 basic problem areas that just kept coming up over and over and over, from major league on down to youth ball, you know. And in these 12 areas, I mean, it's important to understand what these problem areas are. Even if it's in a kind of a low resolution, it's in this phase of my hitting, this is breaking down. Well, that's good to know, okay? But then eventually you need to know exactly what's wrong so that you can fix it. You do that with a rehearsal that specifically fixes those problems, okay? And that's why it's important to know these things. So I call them the 12 touchstones. You can call them the 12 rules or whatever. And I'm not saying there's only 12. There could be 13, 15, whatever. But I've been able to narrow it down to 12 touchstones, 12 problem areas, and sequentially, I mean, from the beginning of your swing, from your stance, all the way through to going out and getting a ball that you have to go out there and buy some time to hit a ball that's maybe slower than you thought it was going to be. So it includes blocking and holding your posture and power development, power delivery, and your timing phase and everything. It literally includes everything. Your approach, staying on the ball, all sequentially. If in each of those areas your intention is as crystal clear as your intention is when you're hammering a nail at a specific angle to get a specific job done, then you would never question if something goes wrong. You don't hit a ball, you tip your hat. You're able to tip your hat and say, hey, you got me out. And sometimes it's good to swing and miss in the sense that, listen, if I got one strike on me and I'm seeing a ball up because I'm looking for a fastball up in the zone because he may throw a curveball, and that's where the curveball is going to start, and that's the only place a curveball is going to start that's going to end up being a hanging pitch or a strike. Now, if I look for a low fastball, he throws me that higher breaking ball. That's the ball that my knees buckle, right? Because you're looking for a ball lower, starts higher, and your knees buckle, scares you. It surprises you. Okay. So if I'm looking for my pitch up a little bit, okay, and then that off-speed pitch starts at that height. You know, you look at the height at which whatever off-speed trick pitch the pitcher has, you look at that height where it's going to end up a strike. And if you swing and miss, so what? You just experienced a miss with great bat speed, great posture, great everything, great base, good transfer, return, everything. Your timing was perfect. You were just 3 feet short. Well, 3 feet short is 21 1,000th of a second. I mean, your automatic mind, if you get another shot at that about 20 seconds later, you know, if that idiot throws you the same pitch again, you're not going to know even how you did it. You're going to just hammer it. And you're going to hammer it because your automatic mind is going to do its work, because you've taken care of your swing, you've taken care of your reactions, you're not leaking and lunging and flailing after the ball. You reached as far as you possibly could violently without leaking, without doing anything wrong. Okay, so the next time that happens, what your automatic brain, your automatic mind that processes a million times faster than your conscious mind, can't make an adjustment that's 21 1,000th of a second. Okay, 7 1,000th of a second is 3.5 baseballs. Okay, so 21 1,000th of a second is what? 7 and 3 is 10 and a half baseballs. Okay, so 10 and a half baseballs. If you've just swung and missed with one strike, now you got 2 strikes. Still looking fastball because you can't miss your pitch. Got 2 strikes. If that person throws you that same hanging curveball, that's your intention. Your automatic mind can deal with it and cope with it. And if they still get you out, you can tip your hat because you didn't do anything wrong. Okay, but more often than not, you crush those things because your intentions are correct. Now that's mindset there, that's timing, and that's mechanics. Okay, it's important to understand, and I call these, you know, there's 12 problem areas, there's 12 touchstones. The touchstones are the natural movements. These are the action steps. And quite frankly, these actions, these movements that correct the problem areas are things that are quite familiar to almost everybody. If you're athletically inclined at all, if you played rough and tumble when you were a kid, if you've, you know, worked outside and done a little bit of heavy labor, just anything, you know, help somebody move some furniture, just anything, then you know how to handle yourself. Then your body knows what it feels like to use its leverage and to be in position and to use the ground. I mean, you know, you're not going to hand off something heavy. You're not going to, let's say you're a right-handed hitter. You're not going to reach to your right, lean to your right. So that would mean rocking back. You're not going to reach to your right, pick up something heavy, and then shift forward to your left, like you're standing sideways, and hand something heavy to somebody else by firing your hips. You're not going to do that because you've done that before. It doesn't work because it's not an intention that is correct. Firing your hips is not a correct intention, and it is one of the quickest ways, along with kicking that back heel out and squishing the bug, to get information overload, because it doesn't work. And then you actually think it's right, and then you keep doing it, and then you add some good things to it and some bad things. It still doesn't work, and then you keep adding things thinking that you're going to fix it, and then at that point you get information overload. The way to avoid information overload is that your information is correct. You're not a perfect person. You're not perfect at hitting. You're on a journey to become mechanically efficient. You have a plan based on the major league plan, and you understand what you're supposed to be looking for, and you understand what your pitch is, and your goal is to not miss your pitch, and you're really good at hitting your pitch. And third, and the most important, is your timing. You know how to cope with the pitcher's assholes and elbows. You know how to synchronize release. You know how to time the pitch. You know how to time it so well. You know how to time it on a level. Remember I was talking about you're probably already familiar with a lot of these things? Hey, when you play catch, you time the ball. You time it from release to your glove. We can go into that later, but my point is that these things, these intentions, if you understand them, you're not going to get hung up on them. You're just going to know these things are true, and then you're going to layer them together, and you're just going to know that they're true, and then you're going to go out and rehearse some of the things that are maybe possibly breaking down. And once you've made sure that you've rehearsed a problem area enough, then at that moment it becomes automatic. I mean, that's how you'll react, especially if your swing is violent. So if you rehearse something violently, then you know that pretty much if you get in that situation and you have to swing violently, and you've rehearsed it that way, that you'll probably hold your swing together. It's not going to blow up in whichever area your swing has been blowing up in, one of those problem areas. So, understanding intention is very, very important. In information overload, you got 170 million views on YouTube, on YouTube and Google, of people giving you their opinions, but they're not talking about this subject. They're not talking about understanding the intention behind it, because I'm not you. You're not me. I don't know what you're going to feel when you execute something. You have to decide that. But we can both agree on what the intention is. We can both agree on I'm supposed to hit that nail into that piece of wood a certain way. I'm supposed to hit a baseball with leverage. I'm supposed to hit it with my weight going into the ball. That doesn't mean I'm going to leak. That doesn't mean I'm going to lose my posture. So there's all these things that we can all agree on. It's just, there's so many variables that we don't talk about that are not complicated. They're not complicated. And they're so uncomplicated that your automatic mind manages all of those variables without even knowing you're doing it. When you take soft toss. When you take soft toss, you're literally able to manage all of the variables that I've been just talking about. When you face a pitcher who's trying to make it impossible for you to hit it, you're able to manage the mechanics, the mindset, and the timing almost 100% of the time. And so, in other words, your automatic mind takes over, and you can access the feel of a good swing. You find a repeatable swing. And because you do that, it's intuitive. You just pick a swing that works, that you can repeat. And then you go for it. You focus your attention on the timing. You know what to do. But if you back things up to 60 feet, soft toss is within about 12 feet. Multiply that by 5, and all of a sudden, those same variables that your automatic mind, your subconscious, knows how to deal with these things without even telling yourself, without even having to acknowledge what they are, you're able to manage it. But here's the problem. When you get back to 60 feet, and then you're facing a pitcher who's trying to make it impossible for you to hit the ball, you have to know what you're doing. So the guy who goes to A ball and doesn't make it and gets released and goes home and thinks he's learned everything, and maybe he's home for a couple of months or a year, go, oh, I wish I would have known that. I'm not necessarily sure, unless he's talked to somebody who's been there in the big leagues and he has an open mind. Because the people that got to the big leagues figured it out, and they have the empirical evidence. They're not perfect by any means. They messed up. They pissed away just as many at bats as most people, young players have even hit, have had at bats. I pissed away a lot of at bats just because I just wasn't focused. My intention was bad. But because I understood what it took to compete at the highest level, and I failed a lot as well, and I had my success, empirically, that which can be verified or falsified by my senses, I can look at these things and weigh the intentions and to know whether they're true or not. That's why you can talk to a Hall of Famer. You can talk to a major leaguer on this level, and they're always going to give you a similar answer if you break it down that way. But if you start getting real technical based on your individual feel of how you do it, they're going to immediately disagree with you because they're not you. But when you talk about intentions, of course they will, because that's how they did it. So if you have questions about this, I'm sure you do. If you care about your career, listen, your career is important. You've been doing this since you were 5 years old, or playing t-ball, maybe 8 years old in Little League. You were shoved into competition before you even knew what you were doing. And because you were shoved into competition, you had to just compete, and so you did a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong. And when you did things wrong, you didn't know what you were doing, and so you had to randomly change your mechanics. Now think about it. If you are changing your mechanics every time you make an out, because of course, if I'm making outs, I got to do something about it. I can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So it actually makes sense to keep making adjustments. But here's the catch. Good hitters don't keep making adjustments at the mechanical level other than becoming efficient and repeatable. So they may spend a few minutes, get out of the box, and get back to a place where they're efficient and their swing is repeatable, and then they get back in the box and they're able to access that repeatable swing that is guaranteed. They can feel how long it takes to get to the ball, so that they can take the power, the magic of the automatic mind and how it processes information 1,000,000 times faster than the conscious mind. You're able to focus all of that laser focused energy on, laser focused ability on timing the pitch and coping with the delivery, the scary stuff, and being able to handle all this stuff through rehearsals, through desensitizing yourself to things that give you troubles. And you're able to have a strong mindset, and you're able to deal with failure, and you're able to tip your hat. You're able to do all that stuff because you understand what you're doing. But if you just change your mechanics every time, think about this. If I'm going to make a putt, timing is the same way as making a putt, for example. If I have three golf balls and I have to make a putt, and let's say it's maybe an 8-foot putt, and it's a really flat, true green where I could pretty much sink an 8-foot putt. Okay. I have 3 balls, and I got to sink it on the 3rd ball at least. Okay. So if I putt the first one long, and then I putt the second one a little bit short, okay, I can pretty much zero in on where it's going to be. Or if I putt the first one at the right depth, but a little bit to the left, put the second one at the right depth, a little bit to the right, then I know I can find the middle. There's always the 3, okay? It's kind of that rule of 3 to make an adjustment. But you got to go on both sides of the equation, okay? Same with hitting and timing a pitch. Okay, you're a little out front, then maybe ball's going to get a little too deep, and then you're going to find that point of contact at the perfect depth. Okay, so there's 3. So if you have one swing, one feel that you've stepped out of the box and you have decided, okay, this is my mechanical swing today. It's efficient as I can get it. And, maybe it's 20% efficient in my stance, and it's 50% efficient in my lining up my levers, and it's 90% efficient in my staying on the ball, and so on and so forth. And it averages out to whatever. It doesn't really matter because it's a metaphor. I'm at some percentage of efficiency overall on my journey to becoming brutally efficient like a major leaguer is, okay? So I go up there, and instead of just using that one swing that's repeatable so that I have 3 adjustments and I can zero in on it, I get 3 strikes too. Instead, I'm making random adjustments with my mechanics, not even based on efficiency, not even based on whether my swing is better this time than last time. I'm adjusting in a way because I remember a year ago I went 4 for 4 and I felt a certain way, and I put my elbow in a certain way and my wrist in a certain way and the bat at a certain angle, and I moved my hands in a certain way because I got a hit. But guess what? It only lasted a day or 2. Okay, why? Because that's not why it worked. It didn't work because of that feel. It matched up, all stars, everything aligned. Maybe you were facing a pitcher that you're comfortable facing. There's a lot of reasons. But the fact is, if you go down that rabbit hole where you're searching for a feel based on, you're going through that kind of that database of good feeling experiences, and you're trying to capture that feel, okay, I can buy off and say, well, maybe it is efficient. Okay, great. But you better know that it is, because your goal is to become more efficient every day. You can't get less efficient. You want to become more and more and more and more efficient every day. Well, maybe tomorrow you're going to be just as efficient as you are today. Maybe you're the same, but your swing's going to feel a little bit different, and that's okay. As long as you feel, you spend a few minutes, get it locked in, it's repeatable, and you focus all your attention out on the pitch timing in the toolbox that you're provided to be able to cope with the pitcher's delivery, his assholes and elbows, that scary part, to be able to cope with the idea it might come at your chin, and to be able to have a mindset where you're anticipating a ball in your zone and not flashes of up and in, or over your head, or behind you, or low and away, and you kind of feel like you got to go reach it because you're never going to get a pitch because that umpire is going to call a strike on a ball outside. In other words, you're just changing your mind, and for every idea that comes to you, you end up, it's like you're just leaning and you're getting pushed and pulled in every direction in your mindset. Same with your timing. You get pushed and pulled with your timing, especially if you go searching around, changing your mechanics. Okay, think of a doubleheader. Play a doubleheader, you get 8 at-bats. In those 8 at-bats, and you take some really bad swings, it's very possible that you could make 10 adjustments. Now, they might not even be visible to the naked eye. Even people that know you might not even know you made an adjustment, but you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you changed the grip strength, or maybe you just changed the angle just a half a degree, but it feels really different, okay? So, but you've made 10 adjustments. Okay, that's 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. That's 10 factorial times those 3 adjustments. That's exponentially, you're exponentially multiplying the number of variables that you're bringing into the equation for your automatic mind to have to process. How are you going to time a pitch with all those variables changing? I mean, you're not even giving, in most cases, your automatic mind 3 pitches with one swing so that you can zero in on the speed. After one pitch, you're changing something. Well, you're not giving yourself a chance to zero in on it. Go one short, one long, or one deep, one out front to find the middle. So if you're struggling with this very same thing and you want some help, I'd love to talk to you about it. If you need help, listen, your career is too short to make all the mistakes on your own. And if you want to be like everybody else, because it's about 99%, because there's only been let's say about 8,500 position players to ever play in the major leagues. There's about 19,000 some odd and counting players to ever play in the big leagues. Let's say half are pitchers. My point is so let's say there's 8,500 or 9,000 position players to ever even get a cup of coffee in the big leagues. My point is that if you just think it's a fluke and that they just, got the breaks or whatever and they guessed at certain pitches, no. They started at some point. It happened to me. At one point, I was lost, completely lost. Frank Robinson gave me the plan, and I was just stubborn enough to follow the plan. And as I did, everything started to open up to me. But this was just on one of these abilities. Man, what if you understood all 3 of them? Well, that's what the big guys do. That's what the Hall of Famers understand. They may not be able to teach it because they don't need to teach it. It's not in their purview. Their job is to hit the dang ball as hard as they can. And there's no reason to teach it. But the fact is, they understand it intuitively in that level, with a depth of conviction to not change it, and to not just, change their plan at every wind of doctrine coming from someone who doesn't have the experience, who's never played at the highest level, who doesn't have the empirical evidence, that which can be verified or falsified by the senses of trial and error, and failed at the highest level to know exactly what works and what doesn't work. I did this because I got into this research because, man, I wished I knew this stuff when I was younger. When I was your age, I wish I knew. When I was in the big leagues, there were things I didn't know. And you know what? Here's the feeling. Well, if there's any more to know, I certainly haven't heard about it. So there must not be any more information. And it's sad because you'll see really, really good prospects, first round, second round, third round guys get released and go home and think they knew everything, they just weren't good enough. Well, no, they didn't. Well, they think it because no one's telling them. And certainly if there was more information, somebody certainly would have taught them. But unfortunately, it's not being taught. And I've been spending the last 20 years getting to the bottom of these intentions. Problem areas, the 12 touchstones, which are the solutions, the movements that are often very familiar. 99 out of 100 problems are solved when you just know the 12 touchstones, these movements, and they become a shorthand where if I can see what's breaking down in one of the problem areas, and I just give you a shorthand word or two or a phrase so that you understand which touchstone we're talking about. And then you execute that perfectly. Well, and there's even a solution for when you're struggling with the touchstone, with that movement. Maybe one part of that movement's breaking down. That's where the high resolution rehearsals come in, where you actually learn these rehearsals that allow you to have strict professional mechanics. I remember being in the minor leagues, and this is the last story, and I'm going to wrap it up. I remember sharing a room with, I'm not going to name names, but sharing a room with with another major league catcher. I was an A-ball. This guy was in AAA, and he had been called up. And I saw him make these moves. I'll at least say the barrel was straight up, and the barrel was above his hand. He was kind of doing like a square swing, but he was using his front hand, and he had kind of an epiphany because, he was right-handed hitter. So his top hand was probably, well, obviously more coordinated. His top hand was probably not having the trouble, but the bottom hand, he had control of it in his bottom hand, and I could tell he was having an epiphany about how to control it, how to make it more efficient, how to make it do what he wanted to do. That's what the big leaguers have. That's what they find out. And if you think by any means that they don't know something that, any more than you do, that's just not the truth. They have more information than you do. They understand more about it. On top of that, they know all the intentions about every one of those problem areas and how to fix it. They know what the intention should feel like and look like when you're executing the touchstones, which are the natural moves that fixes those 12 problem areas, and the intentions of how to high resolution fix these through rehearsals. Now that may seem like a lot, but you can do this in 2 months. In 2 months, if you crash course it, listen, you're already like a professional player anyways. You've been pushed into competition at 8 years old, maybe, or between 5 and 8 years old, whether you play t-ball or not. You've been playing baseball, your whole life. Maybe you're in junior or senior in high school, or maybe you're in college. Hey, you've been playing for 10, 12, 14, 13, 14 years. If this was martial arts, you'd be a black belt. But you don't know any more than you did when you were 8. Why is that? Well, because there's not a lot of people talking about the true intentions who've actually worked it out based on actual experience and asking. Okay? And the biggest thing is you got to be open to the people who were more successful than you to hear what they have to say about these things, which is what I've spent the last 20 years. I can't tell you how many times I was embarrassed, completely embarrassed, asking them, hey, did you do this when you were struggling? And they go, huh? It's like, no, that's overthinking. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're right. That's how I was able to figure this out. Some of the things were intuitive, but of course it was a consensus. No one has all the information, but and even a lot of people didn't even have the information at the tip of their tongue. They knew it when they heard it. When we started discussing it, they were able to break it down when we were able to kind of pinpoint one subject. But often when we talk about hitting, we talk so broad and we use so many buzzwords that could mean a million different things, and people talk right past each other and then no one solves anything. Listen, you're like a professional player anyways. You're working your ass off and you're putting everything into baseball. Do you want to get to the end of your college career and just be a really good player, or maybe even go into pro ball and look pretty good and no one really knows the difference of how good you are because you don't get out of A ball, because you're not good enough, because you don't know these things? That's the cost. The cost is that you'll get a great education. Great, that's good. If you do devote your time to your education, I hope you don't blow it off. But if you devote yourself to your education, get your education. But if you want to give yourself a shot to play pro ball and then possibly play in the big leagues, to see if you have what it takes, concentration is concentration. I mean, hey, what if you are great at a video game because you can really concentrate? A certain video game. You have this ability to concentrate. Maybe you have this great ability. Well, concentration is concentration. It doesn't matter what you're doing. But you have to have all the facts. You're good at a video game because you know how to move the levers and you know what's coming and you know how the game is played. Well, it's the same way in baseball. You're already committed, but you can't make all the mistakes yourself. So this is kind of dramatic, and I'm making it dramatic because you can see how passionate I am, and I've been talking here for about an hour. And I hope I've got you fired up, because you need to understand that you need a mentor. You need someone to walk you through this step by step, because you need someone who's the best in the world at what they do. So I have a program, and a new module opens up each week. And because I don't want anybody to get ahead of themselves. And we're in contact all throughout the week via text, via walkie-talkie type text. And we're going over everything you've learned in that first section. And then we have a meeting. You can be anywhere. I have clients in Europe and clients all over the country. And we just video conference is all we need. I'm in a facility where I'm hitting. All you need to be is in the backyard with a pop-up net or just swinging your bat. Because the first thing you got to do is learn how to swing the bat. Then you got to learn how to hit the ball. But you don't need to learn, you don't need even a back, or you don't need a tee, and you don't need a pop-up net or a ball if you're still learning how to swing the bat, your brutally efficient swing. Sometimes you got to eliminate performance. So if you want to make sure that you have the best chance possible, you've devoted, you're potentially going to devote, 15, almost, 18 years of amateur baseball. And if you want to make sure that you are a 10th degree black belt, and you can do this quickly in several months, in 2 to 3 months. Literally, you go through the program in 2 months and you'll have it locked in. That third month is to lock it in for competition. Well, why can you do that? Why can you do that and yet it takes years and years to get a black belt? It's because you've been doing it. You've had your own trial and error. You've had your own trial and error for 15 years. So you're pretty much along the way. When I take an advanced player like a major leaguer and I work with them and I go through all 12 touchdowns, I can go through it, in a couple of hours. And in a couple of hours, they're so athletic and they failed so many times and they know what's right. They end up telling the answers. The conversation ends up being, how come no one told me this? Because they're like, oh, how come this is the first time I'm hearing this? Well, I don't know, because, maybe it's time, because with the information age and we have the ability to slow things down. But for me, it was because I wished I would have had it. Now, I got one piece of the puzzle. The other pieces of the puzzle, the timing and the mechanics, I had to figure out on my own. But I did learn through watching very closely. I observed very, very, very closely. But I wished I would have known the things for certain. I wish I had certainty. So, if you just want to chat about this, like I said, I've been going on here for about an hour. And if you've stuck with me this whole way, then I know you're a serious hitter. And you really want to go to the next level. If you want to go to that next level, you want to go to a Division I school and you're slated to go to a Division II school, listen, if you know what you're doing, it's what have you done for me lately? If coaches see you, they'll make room for you. If you make a transformation, listen, I went from 2 years struggling hitting the low 200s to the next year I hit 322 in high A ball. I went up to the next level. And the next year I was in the major league roster, and in the following year I was in the big leagues at age 21. How did I do it so quickly? Because I learned the truth. So when you learn the truth, you can get into a Division I school. I got into the big leagues when I learned the truth. Okay. I hope this isn't too harsh and real for you. And I'm not diminishing any, the struggle that you're going through, because I know it's very real. And big leaguers know what struggle is because they've struggled more than you, because they've played longer than you. Right? You think that they've had more success. Well, yeah, they've had more success, but they've also had more failure than you. And they've had to figure out how to cope and redefine success. But it's because they have certainty about their day. They have certainty about how they go about their business. They have certainty about their intentions for what they're going to do. And so you can swallow the failure. You can deal with it. But if you're just going up there random and changing things, you're just exponentially increasing the variables, you're just making it so hard. So, if you would like to chat, if you just like to just figure out what the heck is going on, and you'd like a bird's eye view on what you're doing, and you just want to chat with me, I block out some time each month, and just special for strategy calls. There's a limited number of strategy sessions that I can block out each month. of course. But that time, if you want to get a 30,000 foot view of what you're doing, you can even send me a video. I can take a look at it. And we can go through what you're doing and what you have to do to get to the outcome that you're looking for. And if you're willing to do whatever it takes to reach that outcome, give me a call, chat, let's chat. But you got to schedule it, schedule a call, find the time. Go to mattnokes.com/apply, mattnokes.com/apply, and schedule a strategy session so we can chat and I can give you a breakdown on what you need to do. Worst case, you leave with a great plan and you understand what you're doing. Okay, so I wish you all the best and have a great day.